Professor Kalo, the Supreme Court has held observations made while flying a manned aircraft in navigable airspace over a person's property does not violate the Fourth Amendment. In several cases, police were allowed to conduct surveillance over private property at heights ranging from 400 feet to 1,000 feet. Question, how low must a drone fly over private property before it triggers a reasonable expectation of privacy or trespass under the Fourth Amendment? And what about if a drone would hover?
Sure. That is an excellent question, to which I'm not sure I know the exact answer. It's true that if a drone were to trespass upon property, that would trigger the Fourth Amendment. And it used to be that you owned all the air rights, all the way up into the heavens and all the way down. But of course, after Cowsby and after the reality of commercial air flight, you can only own the property up to the area you could reasonably enjoy. And so certainly if a drone were flying very close to your house, you could argue a trespass. But even if, a few hundred feet above, probably would not. As to hovering, I'm not sure that there would be necessarily a distinction drawn between the capability of hovering or not. Obviously, Florida v. Riley is a helicopter case, and helicopters are capable of hovering in place. And so I'm not sure that would be seen as a distinction of constitutional moment.
Yeah, and I want to ask Mr. Stepanovich about the same issue. How low do you think a drone can fly before impacting the Fourth Amendment?
I agree with Mr. Kalo's statement. The 400-foot mark was indicated by the Supreme Court because in that specific case, that was the height that the helicopter in question was flying at. However, it's an open question on if lower aerial surveillance vehicles would be included in the reasonable expectation of privacy or the personal trespass.
Then to the two of you again, I'll ask this question. Does the addition of technology such as facial recognition, biometric recognition, thermal imaging equipment affect whether there is a reasonable expectation of privacy under the Fourth Amendment? First you and then you.
It does, right? And so we have a case involving thermal imaging where we needed a warrant or at least it was a search for officers to look into your house and see intimate details. One concern I have, and I think is an open question, is if drones were to fly around and not actually feed images to law enforcement, but just detect chemicals or scan for unusual patterns, under the dog sniffing cases, given that they're only looking for evidence of illegal activity, would that even trigger a search under the Constitution? And I think that's an open question and one that's teed up very well by drones.
The invasive technology that you listed that drones are designed to carry in many cases definitely will impact an individual's reasonable expectation of privacy. In regard to the chemical sniffers that Mr. Kalo discussed, there's technology now being developed by the Department of Defense, DHS, and in use by the New York Police Department called terahertz technology. And that can scan for chemical traces down to incredibly small traces that you may have come into contact with accidentally. And people can be triggered as potential targets based on those trace substances.
Professor Kalo, another question to you. If private individuals and commercial companies are allowed to use drones, for example, if utilities started using them to check meters or they obtain video on private property, are there limitations on whether law enforcement can obtain those videos absent a warrant?
Unless the officers instructed the private individuals to do the surveillance, then no, they wouldn't likely need a warrant for that. Obviously, the Fourth Amendment only applies to state actors. There are some limitations that will apply to private parties and not to the government. And so, for instance, there was an aerial surveillance case involving trade secrets that was thought to violate trade secret law, even though it didn't violate the Fourth Amendment.